My wife cheated and called it an open marriage, so I took my money, divorced her, and walked away. Penelope, or Penny as I always called her, and I have been married for 28 years. Our 28th year marked both an ending and a beginning. It was the year our youngest child headed off to college, officially making us empty nesters. I saw this as an opportunity to rekindle Penny and my personal life, which had suffered during our marriage, mainly due to lack of energy and privacy. Being working class, we live in a small house with thin walls, not a grand mansion with nannies and maids. I thought everything was going according to plan, and my plan would succeed once we got home. Despite Penny's protests about her sore rear after the trip, I insisted she let me take a shower first. Then I made love to her. She seemed to enjoy it, and I hoped it was a preview of things to come. Even at 48, she still aroused me like a pervert, and I was still passionately in love with her. Penny is a nurse and was in training when we met. Between raising our children and the constraints of time and money, she remained a general nurse. Over the years, she often lamented seeing younger nurses come in, quickly advancing while she stayed stagnant. To say she was outraged would be an understatement. After some impressive closeness, Penny revealed her well-thought-out plan. She explained there's a chronic shortage of pediatric nurses at her hospital. A 6-month intensive training course would allow her to stay employed there, with the head nurse of another department retiring in 2 years. Penny could apply for that position. Then in 5 years, she could vie for the matron position at her current hospital. This was Penny's ultimate goal. She'd researched it thoroughly and found out she could be paid during training, easing the burden on our income. Her increased salary would help us reach our retirement goal at 60. I was amazed by Penny's newfound ambition. It felt like I was seeing her for the first time, both scary and thrilling. But as I pondered why she hadn't shared her plans sooner, the reason for her reticence became clear. The only place Penny could take this course was in another state, and a $250 flight away. 6 months, it's been a long time. Penny, is there anything closer? I asked. They don't offer an online course? She replied. No, they don't offer it, and it's not such a long time. Time will fly by. During the war, couples did this all the time. Hell, they got by with just letters for years. And of course, we can afford for you to fly in once a month. I remained silent, pondering questions and answers in my mind. Before I could voice any objections or ask further questions, Penny erupted angrily. Jesus, Mike, don't be so arrogant. I winced. I've never been arrogant. Not with her, not with our daughters. I was so offended that I almost missed the rest of her outburst. If it was about you and your career, the whole damn world would expect support and encouragement from me. But since I am a woman, you think that I am selfish for wanting you to support me in my dream. Or selfish. When did I even have the opportunity to make such an accusation? I barely had a chance to get a word in edgewise. Taking a deep breath, I forced myself to remain calm. Anger will not lead to anything good. Pen, I'm not selfish, and I don't blame you for it. Just trying to figure things out. You've clearly thought a lot about this for a long period of time, while I only had 10 minutes, I said. Penny immediately assumed a tone of remorse, explaining further. Housing student nurses and working in a teaching hospital will keep the depletion of our pension funds to a minimum. Flying Penny back home for 6 months probably wouldn't be practical, given how busy she would be. But it would be possible for me to fly her over once a month or so to spend a weekend together. It all sounded pretty reasonable, but the gap between my immediate future plans and Penny's was confusing, and in hindsight, I think it made me vulnerable. Penny began nibbling on my ear, initiating a welcome second round and effectively forcing me to swallow any remaining questions I might have asked. Any physically starved guy in such circumstances will agree to almost anything, I thought. So, I agreed for Penny to attend the next course. The last bomb exploded as she hurriedly climbed aboard. The course began the following week. After that, my well-thought-out questions meant nothing. You already agreed, remember? She reminded me. I felt like I was being manipulated. Penny left after a flurry of activities, looking like a child going to her first camp. She was so excited that she barely remembered to kiss me goodbye. I'm ashamed to admit, but I had a hard time adjusting to the new daily routine. For many years, I didn't have to think about what I would do in my free time. I'm guilty of leaving the planning of our social life to Penny. As long as she made time for my side of the family, I was content with her being in charge of that aspect of our lives. I know I'm not alone in this, as most of the guys I work with do the same. Most of Penny's evenings and weekends, excluding the children, were filled with activities that she organized and devoted to us. Or I attended to necessary chores like mowing the lawn, washing cars, and shuttling the children to and from sporting events. Now, from 6 in the evening when I returned home from work until 10 or 11 at night, I found myself feeling lonely and bored. It's not that I was accustomed to going out all the time because we never did, but now there was no one to chat with when the newscaster reported yet another foolish blunder by one of our politicians, or to share laughs and hold hands while watching our favorite shows. I even missed Penny rubbing her feet. During Penny's first week away, our evening talks lasted for 30 minutes. I couldn't help but wonder if she had factored in our increasing phone bill when planning and budgeting. I also couldn't shake off a twinge of jealousy. She seemed busy and thoroughly engaged in her new challenge. She dominated our conversations, sharing all her news. Her excitement was palpable. The names of unfamiliar people she mentioned made me feel excluded, like I had no place in her life at this moment. Yet, our conversations always ended on a positive note, giving me hope. Maybe her absence would strengthen our bond, and when she returned, we could pick up where we left off with our carnal life. By the second week, our evening chats dwindled to 20 minutes, as Penny claimed she needed to focus on her studies, and our talks were disrupting her nursing mindset. It stung. I felt reduced to an intrusive conversationalist. I made an effort to always conclude our discussions affectionately, but by the end of the week it began to feel somewhat one-sided. Though I tried to remain supportive and encouraging, keeping my frustrations and loneliness to myself, in the third week she proposed that we call only every other evening. And oddly enough, she suggested she call me instead of the other way around. She said it would prevent her from being distracted at inconvenient times. By the fourth week, I received only 2 calls. I tried to be understanding. She had a significant assignment and was working the evening shift, but it was tough. I looked forward to flying to her on the weekend. I missed her, missed us. However, fate intervened. My planned trip had to be canceled last minute because Penny informed me of a flu outbreak overwhelming the hospital with patients. In that teaching hospital, everyone was working flat out. Yet, the weekend didn't go to waste entirely. While refueling, I ran into an old friend with whom I had drifted apart over the years. He and his buddies played poker every Saturday night at the local pub. He invited me along, and feeling tired of being idle and forgotten by my wife, I accepted. The company was enjoyable. We played a few casual games in the back room before heading to the bar for some relaxing drinks. After years of my social life revolving around neighborhood barbecues, cozy family-style bistros, and kid-friendly events, the pub was a revelation. I was surprised by the number of single women my age, or slightly younger, who confidently approached me and frankly tried to flirt. It's funny how, after years of marital contentment and child-rearing, you forget that these encounters happen in bars. It took 3 Saturdays and, I'll admit, several other weekdays when it became clear that Penny wouldn't call that evening before the pattern became too frequent to dismiss as a coincidence. I asked my buddy Jeff for insight. "Mike, you're way off base, aren't you? Haven't you noticed that at our age there are noticeably more single women than single men? What you're seeing are widows, left for a younger model, abandoned due to a midlife crisis, or deceived by cheaters." "Why me?" I questioned. "Come on, Mike. You've been married so long that your self-assurance as a man is closely linked to what your wife thinks and says. Look in the mirror, and then look around you, buddy. You're more attractive than most, and thanks to your physical labor, you're still fit and muscular. You're not dodging a wife with a weapon, and you're not stuck at home with the kids. Buddy, if you took off your wedding ring, you'd have someone within 2 hours without resorting to chat lines or buying drinks." I surveyed the room, noticing more than one interested glance. Jeff followed my gaze. "I don't want to cheat on Penny, Jeff." "I get that, but let's say you're on the market. I'd advise not being too aggressive. These women are out to snag a man tonight. Hell, hate to say it, but I reckon half of them are married and looking for a fling, just like half the guys here. Now look over there." Jeff gestured to a table where a despondent-looking woman in her 40s sat with 5 friends. She's probably just been traded in for a younger model, and now her friends are consoling her. Give her a few weeks, she'll be back looking for a hookup to prove she's still got it, and blame it all on her ex. If you're after a quick fling, come back then. Or next time, don't flash your wedding ring when one of the cougars comes over. It all depends on what you want. For something more lasting, check out that table." Jeff pointed to a group of women around my age, laughing and enjoying themselves. "Looks like 2 are married, 2 aren't. 3 of them are scoping the room. That's where I'd aim if I were single. A bunch of co-workers having fun together. 2 are hitched, but that doesn't stop 1. The other 2 are lonely but not desperate. They might seize an opportunity, but they're not actively seeking it." Just then, my phone buzzed with a text from Penny, apologizing for being too busy to call. I tried to appreciate the gesture, but it was hard, as her calls and texts grew fewer. At least she remembered to sign off with "love you" better than her last few messages. I replied with a quick "love you too" before turning back to Jeff. Okay, I'll prove my point. Take off your ring, then head over to the part of the bar nearest that table and order a drink, he urged. I followed his advice, leaning against the counter, watching discreetly. Within a minute of resting my elbows on the table, one of the married women sprang up, slipping her ring into her pocket. She boldly offered to buy me a drink, but lost interest when I mentioned my marriage. I couldn't resist pointing out that I'd seen her remove her wedding ring. She blushed, somewhat embarrassed. The others at her table observed as one of the single women approached me just as the bartender took my order. She waited for my drink to arrive before placing her own order. Glancing back at their table, I noticed their glasses were mostly filled, so it wasn't surprising when my new acquaintance at the bar greeted me and initiated a polite chat. A quick assessment told me she wasn't quite my type, and my body language must have given me away because she soon returned to her friends with a round of drinks. Sipping my drink, I awaited Jeff's return from the restroom to confirm his insight when I heard a soft hello behind me. Turning around, I found the second single lady from their table confidently looking at me. With my newfound understanding of the situation, I sensed she was creating an opportunity, but wouldn't be upset if it didn't pan out. If I were single, she would definitely catch my interest. It was hard to gauge her age. She could be my age or slightly younger. Attractive, slender, but not overly so, with soft, honey-colored hair framing her face and a genuine smile. Glancing at her ring finger and then mine, I noted neither of us bore any untanned marks indicating infrequent ring wearing due to our respective jobs. Custom dictated I offer her a drink, but she declined, opting to sip her own instead. There was a confidence in her demeanor that I found appealing. Clearly, she was comfortable in her own skin. We engaged in casual conversation about various topics. 10 minutes later, I confessed I was married, despite the absence of a ring. I could have concocted a lie about its whereabouts, but something compelled me to be entirely honest with Andrea, as I learned her name was. She questioned my behavior, initially interpreting it as deceitful. Well, in my defense, one of your friends approached me not 20 minutes ago. She was so forthright that she removed her rings without hesitation. This is Carol. She's not exactly my friend. We just met tonight. She's here with Sue, who is my friend. They used to work together. Honestly, it was surprising to see her here. It's a bit sad for her husband, don't you think? I nodded in agreement. I took mine off not to have fun, but to test my buddy Jeff's theory about why women are age-frequent bars, I explained, laughing at the detailed account of Jeff's theory. Mostly, she concurred with him. Our conversation then turned to Penny. My wife has been away on a 6-month course out of state for almost 2 months now, and I hate to admit it, but I feel kind of lost without her. You must miss her, Andrea empathized. Very much. She's busy with work and study. We hardly get to talk. That's why I'm here. Tired of sitting alone and staring at the walls of our living room, I admitted. So you're just seeking companionship? No hookups or one-night stands? Andrea's direct question took me aback slightly. No, I'm monogamous, but that doesn't mean I can't enjoy female company and conversation. Andrea nodded approvingly. Well then, let's continue our conversation. Talking to Andrea was effortless. She recounted how she and her husband had invested heavily in their children as they grew up, to the point that when the nest emptied, they felt like strangers. 6 months ago, they decided to part ways amicably, and Andrea relished her newfound freedom. However, she didn't rule out the possibility of a relationship if the right guy came along. Our conversations stretched on for over an hour. Eventually, it became apparent that her friends were leaving. I noticed Andrea debating whether to stay or go, but ultimately she opted to depart. I took her consideration of staying as a compliment, knowing there was no potential for a relationship with me. She must have simply enjoyed our company and conversation. Compared to Penny's rejections, this interaction was refreshing. Penny's phone calls became even rarer and shorter. We spoke for 5 to 10 minutes twice a week. I consciously adopted a new, more relaxed attitude toward life, partly to maintain my sanity. There's no use in fighting it. Penny isn't interested. A couple of times when I mentioned the declining calls, she accused me of being childish and trying to make her life difficult with my persistence. Doesn't she understand we're in the same boat? Doesn't she have enough on her plate without my complaints? My protest that I wasn't complaining but simply stating facts went unheeded, and as punishment, I didn't hear from her for 5 days. Refusing to dwell in unhappiness and tired of feeling frustrated and powerless at Penny's whim, I began frequenting the bar several times a week just to socialize. My visit to Penny the following weekend was inconvenient, as she had assignments. It was painful. We'd been apart for 10 weeks, and I felt like I wasn't a priority to her. She made no effort to carve out time for me, for us. During our last 3 conversations, she didn't even bother to inquire about my activities. When the following week she announced she was having a tough time with her periods and wasn't in the mood to talk, I wasn't surprised. The next evening, breaking protocol, I called her cell phone. One of her roommates answered, informing me Penny had taken sleeping pills and retired early, leaving her phone with her friend for peace of mind. Meanwhile, I found solace in my social life, which proved more fulfilling than waiting at home for phone calls that never came. The absence of calls left me feeling like a lovesick teenager pining by the phone. I joined the Thursday night darts competition when one team needed a player, and I unexpectedly enjoyed the Tuesday night trivia quizzes. I met intriguing people of both genders, always making it clear to single women that I was married and not interested in cheating. Andrea often approached for a chat when she was with her friends. She began spending time with a guy and deemed him interesting enough for a relationship. However, it only lasted 2 weeks before he vanished. She confided that she couldn't handle his intense focus on physical engagement, and he left. This suited her. It didn't pass the seriousness test. We made a point to avoid deep discussions about Penny and my relationship, and Andrea never offered her opinion on Penny's behavior, which suited me fine. I was resentful toward my wife and her disregard for me. We went 14 weeks without seeing each other, and phone calls remained scarce and brief. Even worse, our conversations felt like an imposition on her. Sure, she had taken on the challenging task of balancing work and school, but did that mean I should be neglected? Forgotten like old, worn-out shoes? Could regular brief conversations and texting really hinder her goals that much? The more time I spent with Andrea, the more I appreciated her warmth, friendliness, humor, and intelligence. I even enjoyed helping her, feeling useful when she needed support at the bar. I'd wait for her signal when she wasn't interested in someone, but found it difficult to leave. When she signaled, I'd approach, kiss her on the cheek, and deter the guy. Then I'd chat with Andrea until he left. What troubled me was how eagerly I looked forward to talking to her. She was a great conversationalist. We'd engage in discussions, nothing flirtatious, unless debating Pepsi versus Coca-Cola counts. Despite there being nothing inappropriate, I couldn't deny feeling disappointed if I didn't see her in my evenings. For the first time, I understood how someone could be seduced into an affair. Suddenly, cliches like "my wife doesn't understand me" or "my wife ignores me" made sense. I don't condone cheating, but I gained a new understanding of how it happens. The temptation was strong, a situation I never expected to find myself in. With each passing day, my resistance weakened. So far, I had refrained from any inappropriate actions with Andrea, but I wasn't a saint. With constant reminders of Penny's indifference, I didn't know how much longer I could resist. I wondered if Penny felt the same way, but quickly dismissed the thought. She's too preoccupied with work and school to miss me or pursue another man. However, halfway through her training course, I knew I had to act, or our marriage would suffer irreparable damage long before the 6 months were up, and I'd become something I never thought I was capable of, a cheater. I decided to call Penny without expecting her to call me. "Hi, darling, I can't talk for long," she began, igniting a hint of irritation in me. I pushed it aside. Anger wouldn't help. "I know you're always busy, but I need you to make time for me." "I'll be brief." I heard her impatient sigh and suppressed my frustration. "Penny, let me be direct. You've become distant. Our calls are dwindling, and even when we do talk, you act as if I'm bothering you. You disregard my feelings and needs. It's as if you've forgotten there are 2 people in our marriage. Yes, I'm here to love, support, and encourage you, but I also deserve time and attention." If I hoped my words would resonate with her, I was mistaken. Jesus Christ, Mike, what are you saying? I've spent my entire adult life prioritizing our family, and now it's my turn. You're making it sound like I didn't prioritize our family, like I didn't sacrifice or compromise for them. I gave up a lot in every way. I put you and the children first. So tell me, since you brought it up, when was it my turn? Because I think I missed it. I was probably too busy with work to notice myself too. Penny burst into tears. "How dare you suggest I didn't sacrifice for our family, you ignorant idiot?" I tuned her out for about a minute, not wanting to absorb the insults I knew were coming. When she finally calmed down, I attempted to reason with her again. "Penny, our marriage is in trouble. Can't you see that? If things stay as they are, or God forbid worsen, we won't have a marriage left by the time you finish this course. Lord, I'm tired of your complaining and guilt-tripping. Grow up." I didn't bother listening to the rest of her rant. I hung up. Apparently it struck a chord because she immediately called back. "Look, I'm sorry, Mike, but you have to understand how important this is to me. I need it. Our marriage is fine." I didn't engage further. She wasn't listening. "Of course, I miss you terribly too, and I'm sorry you're struggling without me, but in the long run, this will benefit us. You'll see. We're halfway there already." After she passed out, forgetting once again to say she loved me, I grabbed my keys and headed to the pub. Maybe a cold beer would ease my disappointment. But halfway through my first glass, I realized I wasn't in the mood to socialize. I was hurt and angry, filled with anxiety, resentment, and disappointment. These emotions churned inside me like a washing machine. Not even Andrea's friendly smile could lift my spirits. I finished my drink hastily, said goodbye, and headed home. As soon as I walked in, I received a text message on my phone. "Are you okay? You seemed off today." "I'm worried. Call me if you need someone to talk to." I stared at the message, tears welling in my eyes. A woman I'd known for only 2 months cared more about my well-being than my wife of 28 years. Sitting on the couch, I realized I didn't know how to respond. For the first time since meeting Andrea, was I getting too close? Was I emotionally cheating? We'd never discussed Penny or the state of my marriage, and I hadn't shared anything embarrassing to admit this to my wife. I knew I needed to tread carefully. "I'm okay, just had a rough day. See you Thursday if you're at the pub. Take care, Mickey." I scrutinized the text before sending it, ensuring it sounded casual. Then I heated up leftovers and ate standing at the sink. Realizing Penny and I hadn't talked about my upcoming visit next weekend, since Penny hadn't mentioned anything, I decided to surprise her by booking a last-minute flight for next Friday. I couldn't wait another week to see her. I needed to be with her, to remind myself how much I loved her. Although the thought of Penny being unfaithful hadn't crossed my mind, I opted for the surprise visit. This way, she couldn't brush me off again. Finally, Friday arrived. Leaving work early, I headed straight to the airport. Everything went smoothly, and by 6 p.m., I stood at Penny's doorstep. Jenny, the housemate who'd answered Penny's calls earlier, let me in and explained Penny and their other housemate, Gail, hadn't returned from school yet. As I retrieved my phone from my pocket, Jenny waved, mentioning she'd call Penny, her expression tinged with concern. Before she could dial, the sound of keys rattling in the front door echoed through the house. Penny's face lit up with surprise when she saw me, exchanging a quick kiss before darting off to the bathroom. I found it odd that she took her phone along, but with Jenny hovering nearby, I didn't bring it up. Jenny and I engaged in an awkward conversation while waiting for Penny, who seemed to spend an unusually long time in the restroom. Finally emerging, rushing down the hall to her room, she urged me to continue chatting with Jenny. As Penny retreated, Jenny visibly relaxed, and our conversation grew more relaxed too. Despite the significant age gap, I no longer felt self-conscious about it. During our conversation, I observed Penny carrying a load of sheets to the laundry room and returning with fresh ones, prompting a smile from me. Was she trying to impress me, reminiscent of our early dating days? Once Penny deemed her room sufficiently tidy, she suggested we freshen up together before heading out. I found it odd that she opened the window, despite her aversion to the cold. After over 3 months apart, seeing Penny undressed under the shower, water cascading over her ample bosom, stirred intense desire in me. I proposed, but she teasingly suggested we wait until after dinner for dessert, citing her hunger. We managed to find a nice seafood restaurant Penny had recommended, where she chuckled at my quip about oysters not being aphrodisiacs. Reflecting on the surprise visit, I felt it was the right decision. We enjoyed ourselves with 2 bottles of fine Riesling. But one thing tarnished the evening: Penny's constant interruptions to read and respond to text messages. Despite hesitating to address it, given our teachings to our children about rudeness, I decided to bring it up, risking spoiling the mood. "Oh, honey, you know I wouldn't normally do this, but I'm one of the older students, and some of the younger ones see me as a mentor. I need to stay connected," Penny explained between texts, even as she devoured her salmon. She then asked how long I planned to stay, mentioning she had tasks to complete over the weekend. I tried not to feel disheartened by her question, feeling like she was already planning to send me back home as soon as possible. Despite my desire to have alone time with Penny, I took my time at dinner, wooing her as if we were young lovers once more, rather than a seasoned married couple. By the time we walked hand in hand back to Penny's house, it was already 11. I noticed another car in the driveway belonging to Gail, Penny's housemate, who typically finished work around 10. The apartment lay in quiet darkness, with only the soft glow of the hallway light providing illumination as we entered. After dinner wine and our earlier shower, I felt a tension in the air. The time for gentle courtship seemed to have passed. Scooping up my wife in my arms, I carried her to the bedroom and gently placed her on the bed. Despite the 15 weeks of abstinence, I resisted the urge to take her roughly. There was an unfamiliar atmosphere that evening, a sense of distance between us. Our conversation during dinner and our walks had felt strained, as if we were no longer as connected as we had been just 4 months ago. The idea of taking her forcefully implied a familiarity that seemed lost. So, as Penny lay on the bed, slightly dazed from wine, I swiftly removed her underwear while she did the same with her top. Though initially confused, she soon relaxed, allowing me to undress her further. As we engaged in passionate closeness, Penny's reactions were markedly different from what I knew of her. Normally reserved, she now embraced the moment with abandon. It was a stark departure from her usual demeanor, which I attributed to her strict Catholic upbringing. But in that moment, she seemed liberated, unreservedly enjoying our connection. Her enthusiasm guided me, and I reveled in the rediscovered closeness. However, just as I teetered on the brink of losing control, an impatient knock shattered the moment. A female voice, unfamiliar to me, demanded entry, expressing frustration at our nocturnal activities. It was as if a bucket of ice water had been dumped over us. Suddenly, everything became clear: the shaved pubic area, the mysterious presence between us, the dwindling phone calls, the resistance to my visits, even her abrupt disappearances to the bathroom. It all made sense. As I gazed into Penny's eyes, I saw a mixture of horror and desperation. It dawned on me that she had been communicating with her lover, perhaps even during our dinner at the restaurant. Disgust washed over me as I beheld her disheveled appearance. She was no longer the woman I loved, but a betrayer, an adulteress. Instinctively, I knew I had to leave before my anger consumed me. Hurriedly dressing and gathering my belongings, I avoided looking at her, unable to. The sight of Penny seemed oblivious to the turmoil raging within me, continuing to hurl accusations as I made my exit. 6 months may be a long time, but her betrayal had shattered whatever remained of our trust. How many of them are married? They made me feel youthful and liberated, not like someone entering Grandma's twilight years. Thanks for letting me know there's more than just good old Jake. We can get through this. Oh wait, we can't. As I fled, Penny's cries grew louder and more desperate. From behind the door, I heard a mounting sense of concern. Finally, suitcase in hand, boots untied, and without a backward glance, I swung open the door. She almost collided with me as she was pushed from the outside while I pulled her from within. In that moment, I found myself face to face with a young woman who I assumed was Gil. Over her shoulder, I glimpsed Jenny looking disheartened as I strode past my bewildered housemates toward the front door. I heard, "Who the hell are you?" before slamming the outer door. I replied over my shoulder, "Penny's ex-husband," emphasis on ex, and disappeared into the night. I had a flight to catch, a lawyer to meet, a marriage to dissolve, a sorrowful tale to share with family and friends, a broken heart to heal, and a honey blonde to get to know better. At the bar, I was startled when Mike answered the phone, half expecting it to go to voicemail like all the other calls I'd made over the past 4 days. "Hello, Penelope. What's happened?" I couldn't find words to speak, despite all my rehearsed thoughts. His tone threw me off. It wasn't one of heartbreak or fury, which I had anticipated. I wasn't prepared for his indifference. It felt like I was nothing more than an acquaintance. In the ensuing silence, his impatient sigh reverberated, causing panic to well up within me, fearing he might hang up. "Please, Penelope, make it quick. I don't have all day. I'm busy. It's quiz night today." "Quiz night? How could that take precedence over our marriage?" I blurted out before I could stop myself. "Obviously, Penelope, you don't understand how important this is to me. I need it." I winced as echoes of past conversations reverberated in my mind, feeling a surge of anger as Mike seemed to throw them back at me. "Please don't trivialize our marriage like that. We need to talk," but it seemed futile. He might as well have not spoken at all. "Listen, I have to go. The team relies on my history knowledge. I can't let them down. Let's talk later." Staring at my phone in disbelief, I felt the sour aftertaste of the wine I had drunk to steady my nerves before the call. Reflecting on my decision to stay rather than fly home immediately, I regretted giving Mike time to cool down. I shouldn't have hesitated. I should have chased after him, undressed if necessary. What held me back? Fear, nerves, guilt, shame all played a part to varying degrees. And, of course, the training course was also a significant factor. I had a crucial exam on Monday, and I was determined not to let 3 months of hard work go to waste, no matter what. While I had enjoyed myself during my time away, I had also put in a lot of effort and didn't want it to be for nothing. Over the weekend, I used the need to study for the exam as a distraction between my attempts to reach Mike. The exam took place yesterday, and I still hadn't booked a ticket home. Encountering Mike in our home somehow made the situation feel more real, as if the house belonged to him and the apartment to me. Though it seemed unlikely, I hoped he would return so we could talk on my terms. I rested my head in my hands. Facing reality was difficult. 4 days had passed and it was clear Mike wasn't coming back to confront me. I glanced at my phone and saw several messages from Jake, resisting the urge to open them, which was also challenging. The time on the screen indicated it was already 7 a.m. It was too late to ask the course coordinator for time off. I would have to wait until morning. I hoped I wouldn't need to explain in detail why I needed the time off. It would undoubtedly be awkward. Simply mentioning family matters should suffice. Putting my phone away, I wandered into the kitchen and peered into the pantry, feeling overwhelmed by the thought of preparing anything, especially since I had no appetite. I retreated to my room, lying on the bed and staring at the ceiling. Despite closing my eyes, sleep eluded me. My mind remained active. How could I make Mike understand that my absence was separate from him and us, running parallel rather than opposing? How could I convey that our marriage was never in jeopardy? I loved him, always had and always would. A surge of anger coursed through me. Curse men and their egos. Curse pride. Yes, I had broken my wedding vows, but only physically. Emotionally and mentally, I was still devoted to Mike. How could I make him see that this was all that truly mattered? Not a mere physical lapse, but the enduring connection of heart and mind. While I had succumbed to temptation, just as this course promised financial benefits in the long run, my indiscretion would invigorate our bed life. Couldn't he see that? He would finally have the vibrant, uninhibited closeness he had long desired. I turned and noticed Mike's deodorant on the bedside table, left behind in his rush to leave. Leaning over, I picked it up and brought it to my face, the familiar scent bringing tears to my eyes. Closing them, I buried my face in the pillow, trying to erase the image of his shocked and pained expression. Hurting him was not my intention, but despite this, I felt deep regret for my actions. Clutching the deodorant to my chest, I tried to focus on the positives. None of our children had contacted us, and I hoped that Mike hadn't told them anything. He also hadn't yelled or insulted me, which should be a good sign, right? Sitting up, I entertained the worrying thought that Mike's silence might be due to him dealing with lawyers, changing locks, or emptying bank accounts to hurt me and our marriage. Jumping out of bed, I hurried to the living room where I left my laptop. Grabbing it, I returned to the room, my ears pounding as I waited for it to load. It felt like an eternity had passed. With trembling fingers, I logged into our bank account. Leaning on the pillows, tears streamed down my cheeks, but this time they were tears of relief. Mike hadn't touched the money. As I wiped my tears, I prepared to log out when a nagging voice warned me. Just because Mike hadn't emptied his accounts yet didn't mean he wouldn't. Wanting to protect myself, I transferred a small amount to an old account in my name, enough to cover expenses like plane tickets, taxis, and food. I intended to log out, but the small messenger icon showed messages for me. Despite my intentions, curiosity overcame me. Clicking on it, I saw messages from Jake, a gorgeous 25-year-old. More tears streamed down my cheeks, tears of disappointment and melancholy. Despite everything, at that moment, I longed to call him, to hear him tell me how hot I was again. I wanted to see his need for me in his face and body. Cursing the young man who started this, I remembered the first time I was taken advantage of after drinking too much while trying to fit in with younger classmates. But it was good, damn good. And then I couldn't stop. I wanted lust. I wanted to feel admired and desired, to be told again that I was the best woman in their life. I wanted to feel strong again. This power was absorbed. I was at war with myself, knowing that if I answered Jake's messages, he would come. I whimpered, the sound escaping me as I clenched my fist and pressed it to my lips. I should have resisted. If Mike found out about this, it could mean the end of my marriage. Rolling onto my stomach, I inadvertently knocked the laptop off the bed, causing it to crash to the floor. I didn't care. I cried over my loss, knowing there would be a price to pay. To save my marriage, I must never give in to my dependence again. Drifting off to sleep, I woke to sunlight streaming through the window. Feeling terrible, I trudged into the bathroom for a shower. Inserting my key into the lock, I turned it, relieved to find that Mike hadn't changed the locks. Another good sign. He hasn't touched the bank accounts, hasn't informed our kids, hasn't served me with divorce papers. It's Thursday, so he's had plenty of time to prepare them, and my keys still work. Mike will forgive me. It may take time, but he will forgive. Love fills me. Mike is a good person, the best, and he loves me. He will find a way to come to terms with this, and we will move on with our lives. We will both pay a price for this. Mike will always know that I found pleasure with another man, and I will have to never go out with him again. Trials of fidelity, of course. This is a high price, but it is worth paying. I opened the door, expecting to find the house in disarray. Mike's 3+ months of being alone were about to create a huge mess. I was wrong. Everything is clean, neat, at least in the living room. I went into the kitchen and dining room. It's the same there, spotlessly clean. He even wiped off the dust. Was he cleaning here in preparation for my return? If so, then this is another good sign. But where is he? It's 6:30. He should be home after work looking for his dinner. I went over to the stove and ran my hand over the burners. They were stone cold. I checked the refrigerator. It's fully stocked, including a plate of fried chicken and vegetables wrapped in plastic. Did he really cook something like that in the microwave for dinner? There are no dishes in the sink. Did he wash and dry them or decide to dine out? I thought about calling or texting him, but after our only conversation on Tuesday, I wasn't comfortable with what he might say. He definitely didn't come to pick me up at the airport, even though I sent him an SMS with flight information. Sighing, I filled the kettle, ready for a much-needed cup of tea. While I waited for it to boil, I pondered the conflicting signs Mike was giving me. On one hand, he did nothing that would suggest he's decided to end our marriage, but at the same time, he ignored my voicemails and text messages and didn't meet me at the airport. Maybe he's just being petty and wants to punish me. After making tea, I sat down at my usual spot at our table, looking at the table and the empty chair around it. I smiled, remembering the lively discussions and banter exchanged. We may not have been wealthy financially, but we certainly were rich in love and happiness. Those memories touched me. Mike will remember them too, and he's such a softie when it comes to kids. He wouldn't want them to have to choose or divide their time between us. For this reason alone, he will find a way to forgive me. But the question remains open. Where is he? Leaving the cup of tea on the table, I climbed the stairs and walked along the corridor to our room. Okay, he was at home. There was still a faint warmth in our bathroom. Once again, I was struck by the cleanliness. It's not that Mike was messy, but I assumed without me around, he might revert to typical guy behavior and not bother tidying up. Lost in thought, I returned to the dining room and sat, sipping tea. Where could he be? My stomach growled. I was hungry. I headed to the refrigerator. Could Mike have saved the chicken dinner for me? I lifted the corner of the wrap and took a sniff. It smelled delicious. I placed the plate in the microwave and sat back down, waiting for it to beep. The fact that I had no clue where my husband was bothered me. I replayed our conversations over the past 16 weeks. What did Mike say he did for fun? I couldn't recall much. Glancing around the room, I realized he doesn't usually spend his evenings at home. Anxiety crept into my stomach. Mike never used to go out for boys' sleepovers or weekend fishing trips. He's always been a family man. Has that changed during my absence? A vague memory of a name teased the edges of my consciousness. Something Mike mentioned in the early weeks of my course. Who was it? John, Jeremiah, Jason? I had a feeling it started with a J, but none of the options I came up with rang a bell. Then it hit me. Jeff. Jeff, whose last name I couldn't recall. I hurried to the sideboard where we kept an old notebook. It was ancient, from a time when we were too lazy to input numbers into our phones. Page after page, I scanned, searching for Jeff, and I found him unders. Well, Jeff Saunders, with another number scribbled beside it, so I assumed it was the same Jeff. I dialed the number into my phone. It rang a few times before going to voicemail. Frustrated, I thumped the table. Would nothing go right? The microwave beeped, reminding me I hadn't taken out the reheated leftovers. I'd completely forgotten about eating. I decided to enjoy my dinner while contemplating what to say when I reached Jeff. The meal turned out surprisingly tasty. Once things improved with Mike, I'd suggest he cook more often. Finishing the last bite, I took my plate and utensils to the sink. Now it was time for my second attempt to call Jeff, and I was nervous. What if Mike had already told him? Jeff was usually pretty straightforward. What if he confronted me? With a sigh, I resigned myself to it. Decision made, I checked my call log and hit redial for Jeff's number. He answered on the third ring. Hello. There was a hint of surprise in his greeting. Hi Jeff, this is Penny Granger. I was wondering if you knew where Mike was. There was a pause and I held my breath, hoping he wouldn't hang up. His silence allowed background noise to filter through. Hello Penny, long time no see. Yes. How are you doing and how's... I paused, struggling to recall Jeff's wife's name. Jane and the kids? Jane's fine, he replied, emphasizing his wife's name. I cringed. Now wasn't the time to mix up her name and potentially offend her husband. Everything's great with us and you? I sensed a shift in Jeff's tone. He knew. It got better. Is Mike with you? Yes, he's here. And where are you? At a darts competition. With partners. I gritted my teeth, suppressing a sarcastic remark. Jeff knew I wanted to know Mike's whereabouts. I asked twice, but it was clear he wasn't going to make it easy. Sounds nice. And where's that? At the pub. Which one? My local one. I closed my eyes. Clever guy. What's the name of your local pub? I asked, trying to stay cordial. The Royal. Not giving him the satisfaction of asking for his address, I thanked him and hung up. His parting words, dripping with sarcasm, infuriated me. Anything for the better half, Mike. A sarcastic idiot. I opened my browser and searched The Royal on Google. Turns out there were several: the Royal Hands, the Royal George, and the Royal Oak. It took me 10 more minutes to find out that the Royal Oak was hosting a couples darts event. I grabbed my bag, checking my hair and makeup in the hallway mirror. They needed some fixing. Frowning at my reflection, I rummaged through my bag for my makeup kit and fixed up. 5 minutes later, I was presentable and heading out the door. Tossing my bag into the passenger seat of my Toyota, I started the engine. As I waited for the garage door to open, I entered the Royal Oak's address into my GPS. Luckily, it wasn't far. My patience and nerves were already stretched. I was relieved to find the pub had its own parking lot, though there weren't many spots left. Couple darts must be popular. As I pondered this, a question arose. What was Mike doing at a couple's event? Just cheering on Jeff and Jane? I pushed aside my anxiety and approached the entrance. Following the noise, I entered a room with tables and dartboards against the far wall. The games were in full swing. Scanning the room, I spotted Mike on the left, focused on one of the dartboards. A blonde woman sat beside him, not paying attention to the game but watching the entrance, and she looked right at me. The expression on her face said it all. She knew. Warmth rose in my neck, spreading to my face. She lightly squeezed Mike's hand, and he turned, locking eyes with me. I don't know what I expected. Pain, anguish, fury. The gaze of a man who's endured sleepless nights. Whatever it was, I was disappointed. He looked unchanged. That's what made me freeze. My eyes were fixed on him, unable to look away. In my peripheral vision, I noticed the blonde woman squeeze his hand once more. My heart sank as I watched Mike cover her hand with his own, offering a reassuring pat. This gesture spoke of familiarity, friendship, and concern. Then Mike vanished behind his broad shoulders, shielded from prying eyes. A man stood in my personal space and I took a step back, only recognizing him when he spoke. Hello, Penny. Oh, Jeff. Hi, I stammered. I was looking for Mike. I understand, and, I want to thank you. Is everything okay with him? Well, I mean, I know he must have been upset after he returned from visiting me. I hope this didn't affect you and Jane too much. He was fine, even great. This puzzled me. Fine? Or great? How could he be okay after... I couldn't finish the sentence. After finding out that you've been cheating on him behind his back for the last 4 months, the heat in my cheeks intensified. They seemed to be on fire. Whether I was guilty or not, it was inappropriate of him to mention my indiscretion. I gave him a withering look, wishing I had the chance to turn him into a pile of ash. Jeff chuckled, fueling my anger. I clenched my fists. Yes, but it's none of your business. I highly doubt things are as great with Mike as you say. We've been married 28 years and he loves me. I know he must be devastated. He's just hiding it so as not to make you feel awkward and uncomfortable. That means he's a good actor. I had to agree. Glancing over Jeff's shoulder, I realized Mike was doing an excellent job of appearing unconcerned. He and the blonde stood by one of the dartboards, with Mike preparing to throw the first dart. It seemed his partner was a blonde. I didn't like it, not one bit. For all my dependence on men young enough to be my sons, I wasn't blind to their attributes. They were like mere sweets, light, sweet, and tasty, but ultimately unsatisfying as a meal. Like sugar, they lacked substance. Mike, on the other hand, was a premium steak, filling and best savored slowly to enjoy the flavor. Who is this woman? I disliked having to ask, but the need to know overrode my reluctance to show vulnerability. Jeff turned to glance at Mike and the blonde, then smiled. Oh, this is Andrea. Once again, Jeff was infuriating, answering only my direct question without offering any additional information. Is she here with anyone? She's married? Hoping to receive 2 answers by posing 2 questions, I persisted. Yes and no. I was weary and stressed, which made it even harder than usual for me to remain patient. So, yes, she is here with someone, but no, she's not married? The anxiety inside me intensified, and a part of me wished to avoid asking the next logical question. I was almost certain I wouldn't like the answer. Who is she here with? With Mike. Despite mentally preparing myself, I recoiled as if slapped. Well, that didn't take him long, I muttered, the pain overriding my verbal filter. On the contrary, Jeff's eyes bore into me like lasers. He had 4 months to get used to being alone. He glanced at Mike and the blonde, smiling. I think he took to it like a duck takes to water. His smile vanished as he looked at me, his tone cutting like a knife. But then again, so did you. It's been 8 years since Mike divorced me, and not a day goes by that I don't regret the actions that led to our separation. Of course, when it became clear that reconciliation was impossible, I was given the opportunity to indulge my dependence. But it was a hollow victory. It didn't take me long to realize that a constant sugar diet was ultimately unsatisfying, and the law of diminishing returns was at work. I spent 8 years chasing that elusive first high. If only I had realized then that I was doomed to fail. I try not to dwell on how my hobbies are getting shorter and shorter in duration. Even less do I want to think about other forbidden boundaries I crossed. I was once a reserved lover, afraid that if I showed too much pleasure, my husband would think less of me. I have now had more lovers than I can count on my fingers and toes, 3 times. I did things that I pray my children never find out about. My relationship with them is already fragile. Looking around the kitchen and dining room, I feel despair. Without Mike, these rooms feel empty. He brought warmth and laughter. Now they're silent, just rooms. I guess I should consider myself lucky that Mike agreed to sell me his share of the house for less than market value. Especially since I never returned to finish my course and remain a general nurse. But it's hard to feel happy knowing what lies behind his generosity. Andrea. Damn, Andrea was rich, and she wanted Mike, with or without money. I knew for sure they had set off on a trip around the world, Scotland, Venice, Florence, the Greek islands, all of it. I knew because they paid for all the children, hers and his, and the grandchildren to meet them in Hawaii in a few weeks. This meant I would spend Christmas alone again. I glanced at my watch. It's time to go to work. I packed my bag and headed to the front door. Out of habit, I looked at my reflection in the mirror and winced. I'm 56, and age is rapidly catching up with me. It's getting harder to attract young guys. In truth, the young guys aren't so young anymore. They're no longer 20, but 30 and even 40. I sighed in resignation. What else could I do? There are few men my age suitable for marriage, at least the good ones. And whether they're good or bad, no one wants to marry me. My reputation precedes me. The only option would be to move to the other side of the country and start over, but that would mean moving away from my children. And I don't see them enough anyway, not to mention an entire continent between us. While Mike and Andrea were probably kicking back and sipping Mai Tais, I went to change the bedding and put in the thermometers. I will end my days as a general nurse, destroying both my marriage and my career. And for what? For the taste of sugar. Sweet but bitter sugar. I blinked away tears of self-pity. Why cry? Nobody cares.